All right, we are letting people in. Hello, hello, everybody.
Hey, Chelsea.
Hey, Casey. We are just gonna wait another minute or so. We're gonna let everybody hop on. Anybody that's pops into the waiting room a little bit late. So we'll probably get started in just a minute here. If you guys want to turn your cameras on, feel free to do so. No pressure if you're already in your PJs, but would love to see your faces. Awesome. And we're just going to give it another minute or so. Feel free to start drinking. You don't need to wait for us. If anybody wants to type in where you guys are tuning in from, we would absolutely love to know where you guys are right now, where you're drinking from. We've got, I know when I looked at the registration, people from New York, from Colorado, obviously a lot of California people. So I would absolutely love to see where you guys are tuning in from. You can type into the chat. So we'll just wait, let a few more people pop in. Admit. Okay. So just a little housekeeping before we get.
Oh, yes.
Hey, Dennis, thank you for joining. Alrighty, so a little housekeeping. I have everyone automatically muted, so just go ahead and either raise your hand if you want to say anything or type in, we're going to use the chat. And then the Scheid Vineyards guy there on the side, that's Graham. He's our club coordinator. So he's going to make sure that he monitors the chat for any questions, and I'll try to answer everything live as we go through this. So super excited. We've got a good group here. And I think we can get started pretty soon. I'm going to have Graham, if you're listening, I'll have you go ahead and take control over the wait room. So if anybody else wants to come in, that'll be on you. We've got people from Arizona, Fair Oaks, California, some more California. So welcome everybody. Awesome to see you guys here. And I think we are good to get started. So just letting you guys know this is being recorded. We are going to put this up on the website for anybody who couldn't join us. So just the little legality there. If you want to pick your nose, do it in private or be okay with it being up on the website. But other than that, I think we are good to go. I'll go ahead first and introduce myself. My name is Chelsea. I am part of the hospitality team here at Scheid. I've been with the company a little bit over 5 years, and I started in the tasting room as a tasting room associate and worked my way up. Now I work more back office with the tasting room team, but I work with the wine club right now. And we used to do these virtuals all the time during COVID. So it's really cool. It's been 2 years, I think, since we've been doing these virtuals. So it's kind of exciting to be back here. And before working for Scheid, I was a Scheid Club member, just like all of you guys. So, hey, Kim. So, what I think I'm probably best at, my expertise is drinking Scheid wine. But I figured I'd find the person who made the wine to talk us through the three wines that we're going to taste today. So don't worry, it's not going to be me blabbing. I have Casey here, who is going to tell us a little bit about himself.
Chelsea, you blab away. Don't worry about me. Hi, I'm Casey, winemaker. I've been at Scheid for 7.5 years now. Started off as an assistant enologist and worked my way up to winemaking. Started making the wines for the Scheid label since 2020. And yeah, before that, I got my master's in enology at Cornell, UCLA before that. Before Scheid, I worked at some wineries in Paso Robles, and yeah, super lucky to be at Scheid now. Chelsea and I are both not in our homes because we have two crazy children at home that don't allow us to be there. Maybe next time we'll have the kids running around and be really disruptive to this whole thing. But yeah, toddlers at home and lovely wife, and yeah, happy to be here with all you guys. Excited to drink, and I'm super pumped about the wines we're drinking tonight. So
Yeah,
so
these are fun wines that we're going to be drinking tonight. And then, so when did you start working for Scheid Vineyards?
2017 was my first harvest. Dave Nagengast, who's our VP of winemaking and made shied wines forever. His son and I actually went to UCLA together. We both ran track there, and I got introduced to Dave by just working some harvests with him and his son, and I caught the bug. And yeah, when I retired from track and field after college, I was looking for that new passion. And I remember calling up Dave. I was like, they're thinking like doing brewing or something. He's like, you know, there always can be more winemakers. And I was like, he kind of like got me turning, and here I am. He hired me on at Scheid, and super lucky that happened and got a chance to work my way up. So
Awesome. I always wondered, did you have like an aha moment? Did you drink some specific wine when you turned 21 and said, "Oh, this is it. I need to make wine for myself"?
I think it was just drinking at Dave's place. That he's got a small little winery in Paso Robles, and just seeing somebody who's, you know, have a crafty little spot. He built his own vineyard with his cool little winery, and like it kept it really simple with all the materials and tools, and he's making this super high quality wine. It was just like, whoa, like if this guy can do it, you know, not that, I mean, he's an amazing human, but like, wow, it's like this is like a possibility. Like it, you know, it wasn't just like a bottle on the shelf and like how did that happen? It was like it became tangible. Um, and yeah, just like the for me, I always kind of wanted to be like an inventor of sorts. And so this is like you get to create your own product and create your own wines, and you know, where do these flavors come from, and how can we get sciencey with this whole thing, and the connection. It's just there was a lot for me to latch onto that I really love about wine and winemaking. So
All right, that is awesome. So I think I said it in the beginning, but for anybody who just hopped on, Casey did make all three of the wines that we're tasting today. So he is going to be able to talk us through the production for all three, which I'm really excited about. That does not mean you need to open all three of the bottles or any of them. I don't care if you're drinking a gin and tonic or water or tea, but if you are sipping along with us, we're going to start with the Chardonnay, do the Pinot Meunier, and then finish with the Pinot Noir.
mhm.
And I also just want to let you guys know that this is a really cool opportunity. We don't always get winemakers that are able to come talk to us. They're super busy. So this is your time to ask questions as we go along. I've got the little chat up here right now, so I can always hop in and ask Casey any questions you guys have as we start this tasting. So without further ado, let's start drinking. We are going to start with the 2020 Riverview Chardonnay. So for those of you who are drinking it, there it is. Proof I have it, and I will be drinking it. So let's start by just talking a little bit about Chardonnay in general, because Chardonnay is a super, super polarizing grape. People either love Chardonnay or they hate Chardonnay. We have so many people, they come into the tasting room and they are excited, and then they say, but I don't want any Chardonnay. And then we'll throw in one of our Chardonnays and they love it. And then we tell them it's Chardonnay and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know Chardonnay tastes like that. So Casey, I'm hoping you can explain a little bit about some of the winemaking techniques that that influence the way Chardonnay is going to taste. So
Yeah.
let's start oak, unoaked Chardonnay. What are the differences? What are you tasting with either or?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love Chardonnay so much as a winemaker. Like, you know, a lot of times you want to let the varietal sing, you want to let the terroir sing, but also, you know, not all varietals allow the winemaker to really put their touch to it. And Chardonnay is definitely one of those where it's such a wide range of an end result depending on your decision making. So it's really fun to dial that in and figure that all out. So in terms of oaked and unoaked is kind of a first place to start with Chardonnay. Uh, and that's also what makes it kind of so hard to buy on the shelves. It's like, Chardonnay, what am I getting here? Is this going to be like a oaky, buttery bomb, or is this going to be like a super light, crisp, you know, acid adventure, you know? So depending on what style you want to make, and we actually do both at Scheid, which is kind of fun, which is why it's like, where is Chardonnay and where do you want to go on your adventure? Some vineyards really lend themselves to being pressed, put into a stainless steel tank, fermented really cool, allowing all those bright, fresh, tropical aromas to come through, keeping that acidity in there. So it's really bright, really food-friendly style wine. And then there's the totally opposite side, other side of it, where you'll press the juice, you'll put it into barrel. That'll end up being, not temperature controlled, so it's a warmer fermentation. You're picking up oak notes throughout the ferment. Sometimes it won't be quite as fruity because some of those aromas will blow off, but you'll really pick up those toasty caramelly notes from the barrel. And then from there you can go to mallow. So kind of world's your oyster with Chardonnay.
So a lot of people would use the term maybe Chablis, right? You hear Chablis all the time. So that would be more, say, a crisp stainless steel style, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Typically.
Yeah, typically, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's definitely
And
weight to it too, but it's in that kind of acid, bright, fresh style. You're not getting that big oak impact.
yeah, and then what you guys are drinking, we're going to get more into it obviously in a little bit, but this is going to be oaked. So when he's talking about any flavor profile that oak imparts, you're going to get that on this, but we'll talk about that a little later. So another thing that is, I think, huge with Chardonnay, or reasons that people either love or hate it, is butter. Are we putting butter in our Chardonnay? Where is this butter flavor coming from? Are you putting pads of butter in the oak tanks?
No, we're not, but it's a really cool chemical compound that it comes out in Chardonnay production. So when you go through malolactic fermentation, that's essentially the softening of wine. All reds go through it, whites. If you want to just have a softening of the wine, you go through malolactic fermentation. So in that fermentation, you've got malic acid, which is kind of the acid in apples. You can experience, when you bite into apple, what does that feel like? And then there's lactic acid, which is the same acid that's in butters and creams. So there's acid in butter and cream, and it's lactic. But you can imagine how sharp an apple is and how soft butter or cream is. And so that's the conversion that's happening. And within that, we can get way into the woods here. There's a compound called diacetyl. They actually use the isolate that used to put that on butter popcorn. It was like such a powerful popcorn buttery aroma. And so that compound gets developed through that fermentation. And so that's where you get your butter in Chardonnay.
So we always, when we do get people in the tasting room, and their big thing is like, I hate the butter, it's not for me. And then we explain the whole process of malolactic fermentation. We always say, well, just go to a tasting room and be like, does this have any mallow on it? And then you'll sound like you know what you're talking about.
Exactly. No, you sound cool.
Just
Yeah.
say mallow, shorten it. It's all good. But yeah, I think it's so fascinating because it can go either direction, and it kind of sounds what you're talking about, like it's this blank canvas, sort of a Chardonnay grape with what you can make as a final product. So something really important with this Riverview Chardonnay is going to be the climate and where we grow it. So let's touch base a little bit on Chardonnay and how climate affects how the final product is, from either really cool climate Chardonnay to a hot climate Chardonnay, because it can grow in either one.
Totally. Yeah, and it's a versatile grape in that sense. But if you're looking at Chardonnay, and we're lucky in Monterey County and where the vineyards we grow our grapes, we actually get this diversity. Cooler climates, you get more citrus character, brighter, fresher. When you go a little bit warmer, now you're getting into a little more tropical, a little more apple, pear. So you got a real diversity in those two climates in terms of flavor profile that you end up getting in this wine.
Okay, I am going to show you guys. I'm going to share my screen. And also, Casey, just so you know, Wendy is a science geek and loves the explanation. So you didn't geek out too much for her. She was into it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay.
You can send me down a total path if you want to.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully you guys can see it. Can you see it, Casey?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm not going to go to full screen because then I can't see anything else. So you guys have to deal with all the slides there. But this is the map we use in the tasting room. And this is a map of Monterey County and shows kind of our thermal rainbow. So I'm hoping for people that aren't from Monterey, maybe only visited us once and signed up in our tasting room, you can talk a little bit about what we see here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is what makes Scheid so special, and Monterey County in general so special. And for me as a winemaker, so lucky because, if you're just in Paso Robles, you're making X number of grapes. In Monterey, you make all the grapes, basically. So what we're looking at here is on the top of the map, you've got Monterey Bay. And below region 4 there is Paso Robles, and those are both two really important features. Monterey Bay is super cool, Paso Robles super hot, and so that when that hot air rises, the cool air from the Monterey Bay gets pulled down the whole valley. So we have a big cooling effect, and as it gets warmer down the basically 70-mile stretch of our vineyards there. So we've got all the way from region 1, which is very cool climate. You're thinking Champagne, all the way down to region 4, which is hot. I mean, you're thinking Spain, and everywhere in between. And what's fortunate for us is we can really dial in what varietals to what region is going to grow the best. So specifically speaking to what we're drinking today, two of them are from Riverview Vineyard, and the other's from Isabelle's Vineyard, just as a reference point. Riverview Vineyard is it's super special, makes really great Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Burgundian style. You can actually see on the map here, the vineyard is below the Gabilon, kind of below Chalon, and across the valley from San Lucia Highlands. And it's on a bench top right over the river. So what that does, it gets exposed a lot to the wind that blows through the valley. And it's also got more extremes in terms of sunlight and temperature from San Lucia Highlands. So it really makes a very distinctive wine from this area here. The wind is really beneficial for extended hang time. Through the afternoons when you should be the grapes should be maturing the best, the vine actually shuts down because it's protecting itself, and you don't get any more maturation during that period. So you get a real big development of flavors, a lot of density flavors. Fantastic wines to work. I'm super lucky. I love this vineyard for both Chard and Pinot. It's so fantastic. Yeah, you actually get a little preview of the trailer of where this thing is being made.
Yeah, so for a little bit of reference, this is not our main winery. You got to go a little bit further south to Greenfield. So I'll go back to this map again, and I'm guessing you can't. Can you see my mouse or no?
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
Me moving it?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. So the red arrow is obviously the Riverview Vineyard that I just showed you the photo of, but you got to go further south to our estate winery. So when we look at this, this is a much smaller winery, and that's because you're doing some really, really cool stuff with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir down here, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this 2020 Chardonnay from the Riverview Vineyard now. Single vineyard Chardonnay. We produced, I think, just 3 barrels, like super, super small production. So explain a little bit about why this wine was made in the small facility and not made down at our regular facility in Greenfield.
Sure. Yeah. Great question. Because why would you make it out in this little trailer in the middle of nowhere with low tech? So really, approaching this wine, we try to answer the question of really what is terroir and how do we best express this location and sense of place. And so we bonded a winery in the middle of the vineyard so that we could not only we're getting exposure to the wind, the soils, but when you do a fermentation on wine, we wanted to not expose it to any commercial yeast. We want to do a native yeast fermentation. So in order to make that possible, we needed to be not in our facility and into a brand new facility that's in the middle of the vineyard.
What am I looking at right now? What is this photo?
So this is like the most inefficient way of all time, but you know we're down to the gritty on this one. This is Chardonnay grapes, and we're scooping into our little 1.5 ton press. And so yeah, we only produce a ton and a half a day. At our larger facility, you know, the reserve side is about 10 tons a day at the regular facility, and the large side of our production is a bit more than that. So just doing a ton and a half a day it's a labor of love for sure, and it's a lot of manual labor. There's no forklifts out there to handle any of the grapes. It's shoveling, it's scooping, turning the press on, letting the juice flow, and then we put it right into barrel to let it do its cool native ferment.
So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Let's talk a little bit about this native fermentation and what that means.
Sure. So most wines, I don't know, 99% of wines that are on the shelves are made with commercial yeast. I love commercial yeast. Fantastic. They deliver every time. A lot of these
Let's
yeast.
back up 1 second. So
Sure.
when we're talking about what does yeast do? What does yeast do to a final product of wine?
Yeah. So yeast is the microbe that does the fermentation. So when you add yeast to a sugary environment like wine, it converts all that sugar into alcohol, CO2, and generates heat. So
Okay.
that yeast is what gives us our booze.
Okay. So when we're talking commercial yeast, you're saying it's something that we love, but it's gonna give us a super consistent product of alcohol the way we expect it, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's it's
Okay.
it's the difference between when you're making bread. If you're going to use, the yeast packet to make bread, or you're going to do a sourdough starter. It's the same kind of concept. When you're using your yeast packet, you have one consistent end result, and that's what's so great in wine. A lot of these yeasts, that yeast packet for bread was isolated from a bakery somewhere long ago. The commercial yeast we use for wine might have been isolated from Bordeaux or Burgundy. Extremely expressive. All of them been very studied. We know what the end result's going to be. And so what's really nice about in terms of consistency is we want to make sure that we don't have any sugar left in the fermentation. If the yeasts don't consume all the sugar and you have sugar left over at the end, that gives chances for the wine to spoil, basically. It can turn to vinegar.
Or
So
sounds like a hangover.
yeah, hangover, vinegar, none of these things are good. So when you use a commercial yeast, you know you're going to get the performance, the sugar is going to be depleted. But with native fermentation, you don't know what you're getting. It's a yeast that's out in the vineyard. It could perform really well. It could perform really bad. But there's benefit in it. A lot of times people talk about native yeast fermentation as like cherry Garcia and commercial yeast as like chocolate or vanilla, like one simple flavor or one that's got a lot of different flavors. What's cool about this fermentation, and we studied the whole thing, is we started off and there were actually 4 different yeasts at the start of fermentation. There were 16 different yeasts in the middle of fermentation, and then there was another 8 yeasts at the end of fermentation. And not one made it all the way through. It continued to evolve and throughout its life cycle. So we had a lot of different yeasts chewing away at this fermentation, and those yeasts are giving different aromatics, giving different mouthfeel builders, giving different textures to the wine. And so when it goes right, it can go really right. And I think we did okay here.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, this started a lot more full than it is now, so that's pretty good. So what's the reasoning then that you can do this native yeast, but then why not bring it back to the winery? Why are we then putting it in barrels in this facility?
yeah, good question. Yeah, so the commercial yeast, as I said, they're super consistent. They're also really, really powerful and good at their job. So when we use commercial yeast in the facility at our home plant, those yeasts are still in the environment. They're floating around. There's yeast on your hands right now. So those yeasts are there, and if just one of them get in, they're going to overtake the whole fermentation. And then that idea of native and letting the natural yeasts on the grapes do the fermentation, it just won't happen. So keeping it out in the vineyard, we're allowing just those the natural yeasts that are on the grapes to do the fermentation. So we went above and beyond to make sure we want to really get, terroir, what's that vineyard, what's on those grapes to deliver into the glass.
So a question we have is, are there different yeasts from different bases?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm reading the question right, there's a lot of different yeasts. There's a lot of different yeasts that are good for Syrah, that are good for Cab. There's yeast isolated from all different places of the world. There's full departments at universities that do studying on different yeasts and isolating different yeasts. It's really quite a big field, and because it's so impactful in winemaking, there's a lot of different selections. So at Scheid, we do a lot of trialing of different yeasts every year. What's going to be most expressive for the type of fruit profile? How do we want to express our wines? And for consistency. So there's a lot of different types of grapes.
And
Yeasts.
they're natural to the grape itself? That's where the yeast is coming from?
Yeah, so if we're gonna get really nerdy, it's called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So it's technically baker's yeast.
Wendy, thank you. he was when we were going over this, he used that word and I was like, please don't. That's too much. Let's dumb it down a little. So he's very happy that you're allowed to do this now. So go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so it's called Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is it's actually technically a baker's yeast, and a lot of them are isolated from wine fermentations or from grapes. But like Opus One did a whole study up at Napa, and they actually isolated a yeast from sap from a tree nearby and used that yeast in fermentation. So as long as it's Saccharomyces cerevisiae, you know it has a certain tolerance to alcohol and acid. Like it does really well. It's super competitive in a wine environment. Um, but it doesn't have to necessarily be from grapes. But all the wines in wine, all the yeast used in winemaking, very rare if it was isolated for something other than a wine fermentation.
And then Sandra, I'm going to try to answer this question for you. She says, what happens to the natural yeast on the grapes that go to Greenfield and get commercial yeast? So my guess, and I think I'm correct, is just that the commercial yeast can overpower
Yeah,
the
exactly.
native yeast to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and just like when you're making bread, you don't start off with like one little, pellet of yeast. You use a full packet, and when you use that full packet, you're just totally dominating. In your bread, even your starter before it gets going, there's a lot of different yeasts, and there's a few cells here and there. But when you just overwhelm it with all those yeasts from doing an inoculation, you're out competing, you're overwhelming, you're out, yeah, the whole thing. So.
Okay.
It's a great tool, and I mean, that's winemaking 101. You use yeast.
Yeah.
We're going a little off the wall here.
Awesome. So let's actually talk about what this wine tastes like. So tell me a little bit about what you're getting when you taste this in terms of the terroir from what do you get that comes from the native yeast from the barrels. I know you mentioned that we did it in the barrels at the vineyard, but
Mhm.
we're also using new oak barrels, correct? Because
Exactly. Yeah, 100% new oak barrels from selected coopers that we've trialed over the years, and we love for Chardonnay and specifically for Riverview. Um, we do the fermentation in the barrel. So actually, when you do a fermentation in a barrel, the oak impact is less than if you did a fermentation in stainless steel and put into the barrel. Putting into the barrel actually allows those oaky characteristics to kind of mellow and infuse into the wine better. So there's definitely that here. What I love about this wine and kind of the distinctiveness of it, for one, Riverview has a beautiful kind of citrus notes to it. For me, there's some key limes, some really fresh characters. But there's also, and from the native yeast, you get a bit of like a salinity, a little bit of minerality, and those are from specific compounds that you don't get from a kind of a normal fermentation.
we've got another question about yeast. This is Casey, you got to come on more often and talk about your yeast here. They
This could be a
want to
3-hour lecture.
know,
I'm having fun.
how do you know what native yeast you end up getting when you start the process or along the process? It's a good question.
So, yeah, so we do a testing with a outside lab. It's essentially a DNA fingerprinting of yeast. So they have a database of what's the DNA of all the commercial yeasts, and then they run the DNA on the yeasts that they isolate from our fermentation at a particular point, and then they compare it to that database. And essentially at that point, we're establishing that's a native fermentation, and then we have the DNA of the yeasts at every point in time. So we did it at the beginning, middle, and end at fermentation. And so because they're all native yeast, I guess we could call them whatever we wanted. The Chelsea yeast did great mid-ferment. The Casey yeast tried to get in there, but the Wendy yeast, yeah, she took us to the finish line. So
Awesome. Wendy, you can make a shirt out of that little saying there, and I'm sure Casey would buy it. Okay, so yeah, I get like butterscotch even. I get citrus, but I get kind of like apple too. I don't know
apple
if anybody
caramel.
else is drinking it. I see a few people, they're drinking something. If anybody has anything specific that they get from it, what do you get that's specific to the terroir?
I mean, what I would say also is cool about this wine. So when we talked earlier about how you go oak versus unoaked, mallow, not mallow, what's really unique about this is it's a oaked wine that hasn't gone through malolactic fermentation. So there's a natural creaminess that you get mid-palate, and that's all from those multiple generations of yeasts doing the fermentation, and essentially dying in the fermentation. They release it's called manoproteins into the wine that gives it body and richness. So it's a really distinct wine and has that acidity because it hasn't gone through malolactic fermentation to kind of bring you to the finish line. So it's a really cool texturally wine and also unique in that sense too.
Yeah, it definitely has that creaminess to it. So it's interesting that it doesn't have any of that malolactic fermentation.
Yeah, and with the age of the wine too, kind of those beautiful oak characters, those caramelly notes are really kind of balancing out really nicely with those appley, those citrus notes. And I love the salinity of this wine too. I think that's really unique. Makes it really food friendly, but also, it keeps me coming back for more.
Okay, speaking of food friendly, I'm thinking like chicken Alfredo, a creamy pasta, because again, like you said, you've got that acidity still there that could kind of break up that fattiness, but also you have the complementary, right, flavors going. Do you have something specific you would do with this?
I mean, for me, because of all the character of this wine, I feel like you could go all the way up to pork with this wine for me, like pork with applesauce, like a apple onion reduction or something like that, where you have like, you picked up those apple notes. I think that would be really nice. And yeah, it's got enough that can hold up to, a solid meat for me. I mean, salmon's always an easy choice, but yeah, I mean, good food, wine, and cocktail.
It reminds me a little bit. I know we make a Pinot Blanc that's 100% oaked, and we always call that the white wine for red wine drinkers. So I get a little bit of that in this just because it has a lot of oomph. It's not I think what some people consider a white wine to be. So I think like you said, it could definitely hold up to some of the bigger, meatier kind of profiles as well, which is kind of cool. Or even some type of like fried tofu if you don't eat meat. I know I've
There you
got
go.
got some vegans out there. Um, Anybody else have any questions? I know we spent a lot of time on yeast on this one. If anybody has any other questions on this or how they would enjoy it or what they taste that we did not taste, definitely type it in or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, I think we will move on to the next wine. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. I know I did. And let's move on to, one more question, Casey. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask this for each one. Aging. So like you said, this is a 2020. It's got some aging on it already that we did. So is this something that you would age longer or is this something people should hold on to, drink now?
I'm a drink now fan, especially where this wine is right now. It still has that freshness and brightness, and there's just enough oak coming through. I think it's at a really great spot. I would drink it now. Now through the holidays, I think
Okay.
would be a total premium wine.
Thanksgiving meal, perfect.
I mean, you could sit on it. It's not the worst thing, but it's drinking so good now. Like, why wait?
Okay, I think I've got a question. Let me see if I can unmute. Dennis, did you want to ask a question?
Yes. How do screw tops that you use at Scheid compare with cork tops for aging purposes?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a couple of factors. The main thing in terms of aging is you want to think about how much oxygen is getting into the bottle over time. So a really premium cork is the same as a screw cap in terms of the amount of oxygen that's getting into the wine. So in the first 5 years or so of the cork's life and the screw cap, they perform about the same. Eventually, depending on the cork that's used, it can lose its elasticity over time. And as it's losing its elasticity, more and more oxygen's kind of getting through. And that's why sometimes those, you got an older bottle, sometimes the corks are totally trash, sometimes they're okay. And there's a lot of kind of inconsistency. So screw cap gives a lot of consistency. Aging over time is super consistent and super solid. That's why a 2020 Chardonnay tasting this fresh it's so advantageous that it's in a screw cap. And yeah, consistency and it's elegant aging in a screw cap. It's just unfortunate.
Okay. Yeah.
We're slowly getting there with premium wines and screw cap. It's been a long time coming, but and end of the day, there's no TCA, so no cork taint with screw cap. So we were tired of TCA. I mean, if you had 2 to 7% of your yogurts failing and tasting crappy, like you wouldn't be in business anymore. So that's about the failure rate of what a cork would be. And so screw cap
Thank
is,
you.
100%.
Cool. Good question. Thank you,
Thanks, man.
Dennis. And I just like that you can put it after you open your white wine, you can put it in the
Oh, yeah.
in the
Put it
fridge
sideways.
sideways,
Yeah.
right? It won't spill. And you can age it standing up. So if you don't have a wine rack or something like that, that helps with storage purposes too. Let's see, do Chardonnays, okay, man, we are getting some good questions today. Do Chardonnays need to open up? You know how red wines, you might want to put it in a decanter. Do we need to do that with a Chardonnay?
They could always use a little bit of time to open up, but I mean temperatures, you don't want to have it too warm, so that's kind of a thought on it. But yeah, I think this wine, 20 minutes and it's probably super premium. It's in that tight screw cap, so a little bit of oxygen, a little bit of air to get in to open it up a little bit is probably a good thing. At the age of this wine right now, I mean, yeah, 20 minutes and then tops and off to the races. I personally like pouring a glass and just letting it evolve, my first glass evolve, and then go back for a second or third. And then it's like perfect timing.
All right. I love a third glass. Good. Okay, cool. Those are awesome questions. Let's move on to the 2022 Pinot Meunier. So this is going to be an estate bottle that we only have done 2 vintages of. Last vintage was the first vintage, 2021. So let's start with what the heck is a Pinot Meunier? I don't even know if I'm saying it right because it ends in an R, so I don't know if it's Pinot Meunier, but I think it is Pinot Meunier. So hopefully you can just tell us a little bit about the grape itself before we even get into what we're drinking.
Yeah, Pinot Meunier, you nailed it. It's those French, they got to throw weird letters into everything.
Okay.
I mean, shoot, am I even saying it right? I don't know. But we have one of our other winemakers, Vincent, French. That's how he says it. So that's
Okay,
my
let's go with it. Pinot Meunier.
Pinot Meunier, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so don't be intimidated by the name. Pinot Meunier is traditionally a sparkling grape. In Champagne, there's actually 31% of the plantings is Pinot Meunier. So nearly a third of the production in Champagne is Pinot Meunier. It's a really important part of Champagne in terms of giving structure, giving certain flavors to a sparkling base. We have about an acre planted in Riverview in Marta's block there in our experimental block. Originally, it was planted for our Isabelle sparkling. We kind of were moving vineyards before we found our home at Isabelle's vineyard, and it was going to go into our sparkling program. But ended up, because we moved vineyards, it didn't really have a home. So, but yeah, Pinot Meunier, it's a very neutral grape, which is great for sparkling winemaking. When you make sparkling wine, it's when you smell it, when you put bubbles into a glass, it's almost like putting a trumpet on the smells of it. Everything just becomes so much louder and brighter. So you actually want to start with a pretty neutral base white wine, because once you get those bubbles getting in it, they're just bringing aromas to the top of the glass. You don't really want to start with something overly fruity. So Pinot Meunier plays really nice in that world. Recently, it's got a little bit more traction in Champagne. Some of the younger winemakers there are using it a little bit more forward in a lot of their champagnes. It gives a little bit of a funky twist, but yeah, it makes an excellent sparkling wine, and I think it can make an excellent still wine too. And so we had some fun with this one.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up because this once again is going to come from the Riverview Vineyard.
Yep.
So with this climate then, if you're saying it's typically from Champagne region, is this then going to be cooler climate that we're talking about here with where we're growing it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it plays nice in cooler climates. It's very similar to Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. Like they all play nice in that similar kind of climate, which is why this vineyard is truly ideal for Pinot Meunier. Too bad not enough people know about it, that we can't just replant a whole block of it, because I love it. Yeah, so it plays really nice in cool climates, and yeah, this one was a fun one to make. And it's kind of in the style of Pinot in terms of a lighter red.
Yeah.
Which why it does so well at cooler warmer climates. It would it's similar to Pinot, would just kind of get destroyed in a warmer climate.
So like you said, this is typically blended, typically done in a champagne style wine, a sparkling, right? So you're picking it a lot earlier, much higher acidity. So I've got some photos here because you did something a little different. I think you mentioned we have just over an acre of this. So we don't have a lot of this Pinot Meunier. So to make it a single variety, right? You had to be thinking that I'm going to do something a little different, right?
Yeah. So kind of what was fun about this one was it was a grape, it was originally planted for sparkling and it didn't have a home. So it was we didn't really quite know what to do with it. So me and the lab manager, who we like to put our heads together and come up with some funny creative ideas, decided how can we make the best Pinot Meunier possible? Knowing from years past, kind of making it somewhat traditionally, it's fairly neutral. It has, that light red color. It's kind of Pinot-esque. So it's like, okay, how do we bring some brightness, some freshness, something cool to this wine? So throughout every step of the winemaking process, we try to get as extreme as possible. So we did a technique. I was reading a research article and somebody was talking about cryomaceration, and just the word itself sounded super cool. So I felt like I just had to do it.
It
Essentially, it's
sounds
just
to me just like something all the I'm thinking like the Joe Rogans of the world that just like
yeah, exactly.
freeze their bodies or one of those types of weirdo
Yeah,
things.
we put them in an ice bath. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially what that is we're freezing the grapes. What's cool about that is when you freeze the grapes, the cells burst and there's a lot more extraction of texture, color, and potential flavor compounds. So we figured, okay, more flavor compounds, let's do it. We know we're starting with a kind of neutral grape. Let's hit it. And also, lab manager and myself included love dry ice. So if there's an opportunity to fill the reserve winery with dry ice and make it look super cool, I mean, who wouldn't do it? So we freeze the whole lot when it's in tank, and from there we kind of went crazy. We did this thing called a cold soak. So we just let it
Hold
slowly
on, let's back
thaw.
up to so the photo here, the
Uh-huh.
dry ice that's on top of the grapes. So the grapes haven't been, what part of the process are you putting dry ice on these grapes?
Sure, yeah. So in traditional red wine making, you'll bring in the whole clusters, you'll put them through a destemmer, you'll put them into a bin, kind of like you can see here. And then it's just a combination of just the juice from the grapes and the skins. You'll add some yeast, you'll do some punch downs like I'm doing here to kind of mix those skins. And after about 2 weeks, you'll press and your fermentation should be dry, so you should have no sugar left. You'll press and then you'll put it into barrels. Then you just have wine, super fresh wine put into barrels. And that's your traditional style, kind of 101 winemaking. And so we added little bits on every end of it all. So right when we crushed the grapes, so just took the stems out and had the berries, that's when we froze the whole lot. And so we'd get that basically frozen juice to try to extract as much flavor from the skins as possible.
Okay, Dave and Brenda would like to know how much dry ice are we using for this type of process?
I never measured it, but lots and lots. We actually are fortunate. We have a, dry ice maker at our facility. That the CO2 is really good for if you have a lot of wine that's a little low in a tank, you put some gas over it, helps protect the wine. So we have that at the facility. So we have this so buckets and buckets. We filled like imagine just filling up a full cooler of dry ice essentially, and just putting that in, kind of layering it in as we loaded it into the tank.
Okay, so we've got the dry ice, which is extracting the color, the flavor. Then the punch down is also doing that, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the punch down is also so if you imagine like when you make tea, if you just like leave the tea bag in the corner of the tea, there's like not you see like that little bit of color coming out, but then all of a sudden you start, mixing the tea up and all of a sudden the color moves through the whole tea. That's the similar kind of thing. So all your flavor and color is in the skins. So as we talked about earlier, there's CO2 that's produced during fermentation. So you have all these skins and juice, it's all one big mix. As CO2 is going, it's pulling all the grape skins up to the top, and then you're just leaving with juice on the bottom. And so punching down allows you to mix in those grape skins, so then you can get more extraction of color and flavors into the full fermentation. Keeps it a little more homogeneous.
Okay, cool. So if somebody who maybe was familiar with Pinot Meunier, they might think, this on its own is maybe bland, or I wouldn't make this as a single variety. So you're explaining why this wine tastes as good as it does because of all the things that you do to kind of bring out the color, the flavor, the characteristic of the grape itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was the goal. It's like it's a really cool grape. We know it has a structure and a coolness to it, and so let's do everything we can to pretty it up. So at the start we did that cryogenic maceration. At the end we did this technique called extended maceration, which is common in Cabernets and Bordeaux. So essentially, you know, I said generally at 2 weeks you'll press. At 2 weeks, you know, you're dry, and so you can press and go on your way and it's all good. But if you let this, we actually let it sit on the skins for an additional 3 weeks. So within that time, there's a little bit more extraction of tannin, a little more extraction of textural components, aromatic components. So on the front end, we were going for how much burst of flavor can we get out of it? How much color can we get out of it from that extraction of the cells? And at the back end, how much can we kind of develop that mouthfeel and that palate and give a little bit more complexity? So we just hit it from both sides of the spectrum. In the middle, we might have used some experimental yeasts, which also add to the fun. Because we did, you know, so many native fermentations and we study the process so much, we actually try to emulate that within this fermentation with a controlled process. So we put different yeasts out, different stages of fermentation. Again, each yeast is giving a little bit of different flavor, a little different texture, a little different profile. Yeah, we just threw the gamut at this one. So it's super fun to do. And for us, it was kind of low risk because it didn't really have a home. So we're like, we got a theory and we're going with it. It wasn't just to do it. We thought it would work. It doesn't always work, but it totally worked.
No, this one worked. This one worked. Before we released it to the club, since this was an optional shipment, we had a staff tasting in Carmel and I poured this for everybody and people absolutely loved it. They were super impressed by it. I see Sandra there. She works in the Carmel tasting room. She was there, so she can attest that I'm not lying or making it up, but we absolutely loved it. We thought it really, everything you're saying, you could taste in it. For me, I get that kind of that raspberry. I get some spice to it, like almost like a baking spice. What kind of flavors, Casey, do you get in this one?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's such freshness and brightness to it. There's that real tart fruit note, which I love about it. A lot of bright red fruits, that pomegranate.
But it has texture, and I think that has a lot to do with everything that you did to it because it still has like that tannin structure, even though, you know, you're saying it can typically be kind of bland on its own, you know?
Right. And another thing we played with this wine is its acid balance. So this wine actually, traditionally with reds, every red you drink will go through malolactic fermentation, but we felt like the acidity on this and what the malic acid did to it actually was beneficial. So this wine we didn't put through malolactic fermentation, which is a super weird thing to do on top of everything else. But I think that's what lent itself to its freshness, kind of gives it that length, gives it that juiciness. You've got that mid palate and body, you've got that fresh fruit, and you got that acidity, you know, gives it that excitement. So yeah, it's just a weird oddball all the way around, just trying to tease as much as we can out of the Pinot Meunier. And yeah, it was super fun. It doesn't always go right. So
no, yeah, I really, really like this one. So another question is going to be the aging on this one. So this one is, I believe, looking at notes, I've got 8 months in French oak with a little bit of new French oak. You want to talk a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, and what we liked so much about it through the process was the freshness, was the brightness of it. So to me, it almost drinks as like a chillable red kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
This has some ageability to it, but I think drinking this young is really where you're going to get the most out of it. You know, now through the next couple of years, I think you're getting into a real premium zone here. I don't know that I'd age it for more than 10 based off of kind of where it's at. And just what gives it the allure is that brightness, that freshness, those beautiful red fruits right now, which, you know, after time will fade. And so, yeah, now for the next couple of years, I don't know if it's super ageable. I mean, drink this at Thanksgiving. This is like the Thanksgiving wine 101. Let's like, I keep saying 101. this is, I mean, it's like pomegranate cranberry, like cuts through your Thanksgiving dinner. This is, yeah, this is that perfect Thanksgiving holiday wine for me. Or, I mean, I know you like your porch pounders.
Yeah, we try to stay away from porch pounder. That makes it sound like I'm drinking the whole bottle by myself. But yes, I think this one honestly doesn't even need food. I think it drinks so deliciously on its own. I don't think it needs to be paired with anything. I would also just drink this with charcuterie, just some cheese and crackers with a really nice acidity to it. Wendy says the acid comes through with the marinated artichokes.
Oh yeah.
Mellow dried sweet potatoes because it holds up to the acidic and the sweetness to it. So pretty cool on that
That
one.
sounds great. This feels like the perfect sauce to that meal right there.
Yeah,
Great.
but again, this is one that you really don't even need to pair with food. It'll do very, very nice on its own. Okay. Anybody have any questions about this one before we move on to the Isabelle Pinot Reserve? I think I have answered all the questions so far. I'm just trying to scroll up. Give me a second. Yes, go ahead, Dennis. Let me unmute you unless you can do it yourself. Can you unmute yourself, Dennis? I don't know if I did it or not. Oops. Hold on, Dennis. We can't hear you. Unmute. There you go.
Okay. When you open the bottle, I often find that red wines taste the best, not the first time when you open them, but the second or third day. But my question is, how long, if I want to open I don't know if I want to open all three bottles because I don't want to finish 3 bottles of wine in one day. How long can you leave it open and still have the real good taste? Because it seems like the second or third day, like this Pinot Meunier I opened a couple of days ago, and it's the best now than it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're just gonna take one glass, I think like you said, that second, third day, I think it'll be great then. Just that little pour, that first glass. If you open it up and drink 3 glasses and have a little bit at the bottom, maybe finish it the next day. But
okay, so it's somewhat dependent on how much you have left.
Yeah, because that depends on how much oxygen you're exposing, kind of the volume of the wine to.
Okay.
So, just another thing to consider.
Yeah.
But I like your strategy.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, we don't need a Coravin. We're not quitters here, right, guys? We'll finish our wine within a few days. We don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we plan on making Pinot Meunier on a ongoing basis?
Yeah, we're gonna make it every year, and if it turns out great, we're gonna put it in the bottle. That's the plan. It's too much fun to make, honestly, with the dry ice that, even if nobody drank it, we'd still make it every year.
Yeah. And that's, I think also we have over 35 planted varieties, and we've got a lot of acreage to work with. So the beauty is we can be super, super selective. So we have multiple tastings throughout the year. And if something isn't entirely up to par for us, we're not going to bottle it. We're not going to give it to you guys. So we're only making these single variety wines when they are absolutely at their premium and they're something we want to put in your glass and talk about. So, of course we want to keep doing it, but we'll make sure that, depending on weather, right, and yield, we're only going to do it if we can give you something as good as this. And I say I have nothing to do with it. I just drink it. So as long as Casey can give you something like this, then we'll for sure keep doing it. Yeah, but that's, I think, again, what sets us apart from so many other wineries is that we can do all these really cool single varieties, and they don't happen every year, but they happen when the stars align. So
Right.
I think it's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, and to be experimental, if it didn't go right, we have 34 other varietals to choose from to put on the tasting menu that might have gone better. So it gives us as the winemakers this flexibility to really explore winemaking techniques and how to best express wines too. So it's a fun deal.
Okay, we've got another question. What makes the difference between the reserve and the non-reserve wines?
Reserve and non-reserve wines, generally, the reserve wines are ones that have seen more oak. Potentially, they've seen more care in the vineyard. And ultimately, they're wines that are super selected premium wines. So this Riverview Chardonnay, we actually started with 16 barrels of it, and we selected only the top 3 for this wine. So, you know, some other barrels went to other programs in the Shy portfolio and elsewhere. And so because we were super, super selective, using the most premium fruit with the most premium methods and the most premium barrels, and then super selective from on top of that, that's what makes a reserve. Estate is also super selective, but not reliant so much on oak, targeting more that really varietal freshness and character, and trying to just deliver on what the variety has to offer. You know, still being very specific in the vineyard, but just, you know, rather than 3 barrels, it's 10 barrels kind of thing. So
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note, even I'm thinking back to being in the tasting room and people asking that question, because it's a really good question, is reserve is a really kind of loose term that's based on what the winery wants reserve to be. So that's what reserve is to us, but that doesn't mean that somebody might like an estate wine better than a reserve wine and vice versa, right? So again, a lot of it is that small barrel selection, really picking what we think is the best of the best, but that's not to say our estate is any less than reserve, and again, vice versa. So it's what we think, or again, I keep saying we, like I am.
You're part of the team.
Yes, I'm part of the team. I'm like, this tastes delicious.
Well,
But yeah, I think to always keep in the back of your mind that it's subjective based on the winery and those decisions that they make. So yeah.
And to that point too, our reserve program, like we won't necessarily do the Riverview Chardonnay every year. That one in particular, that year, it turned out so good. And we're like, okay, guys, we have to do this for the Shy label. It has to be reserved because it, like the next wine we're gonna taste is the same kind of situation. We don't present as a winemaking team unless it's the best of the best for the reserve program. And every year, you know, might be a little bit different. Wow, the Pinot turned out great this year. Oh, the Pinot Meunier turned, you know, every year it's got its own story. And so depending on what shows the greatest that vintage, will be kind of up for the reserve tier.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, nice segue there. It wasn't even practiced. So let's segue on to the last one, which is a reserve small production 2021 Isabelle's Vineyard Pinot Noir. So this one I think is chef's kiss, quite a treat. But what I think is really cool about this one is we just spent a lot of time, almost a full hour, talking about Casey's winemaking techniques and some really cool things he did. So we're kind of shifting gears with this Pinot because I think this one is more about the grape sort of speaking for itself a little bit and letting the place and the grape shine. So let's talk a little bit about this one. I'll first pull up a map for you guys so we can see where this one is located, because we're going to go a little bit further north. And Casey, I will let you talk about this vineyard site, Isabelle's Vineyard.
Great. Yeah, Chelsea, that's exactly right. With this vineyard, this is our actually first year making this into a still wine. So Isabelle's Vineyard is planted for our Isabelle Sparkling program. We have Pinot Noir and Chardonnay there. It's our northernmost vineyard, as you can see on the map, super high up, Region 1. It's essentially San Lucia Highlands. It's almost seems like it's gerrymandered out of it. Maybe we need to gerrymander ourselves into it, but it's essentially the same climate as San Lucia Highlands. It's just below, in a cute little pocket. A lot of our vineyards are very large, and you know we farm for the estate and small portions of it. But this itself, it's only a 2.5 acre little plot, basically split 50-50 with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It's got that San Lucia Highlands climate, so it's on that west side of the Salinas Valley. You know, less exposure than Riverview Vineyard in terms of sunlight. It's got a little bit of protection from the wind because of the angle of the San Lucia Highlands there. But it really makes really beautiful sparkling wine. And what was kind of fortunate for us is we only need so much for Isabelle Sparkling, and this vineyard produces a little bit more. So in 2020, with all the fires, and it was close to the fires. We actually ended up just making rosé out of this wine with these grapes, which turned out awesome. Actually, that vintage of the Scheid rosé was basically the rosé from these grapes, and the rosé turned out so fantastic. We were so excited on 21 to make it into a still wine, and with it being a new site and trying to learn more about what do the grapes do, what does this site produce, we wanted to be as pure as possible to the site and keep it super simple in the winemaking process and just let Isabelle kind of tell us what it's all about. We've got 3 clones in this vineyard, 667, 777 Calera, each have their own little flavor that add to the mix. And yeah, we kept it simple, we kept it clean and clear. And I'm really glad we did. I think that really expressed this place the best possible. You don't always have to be heavy-handed, or you could be as off-handed as possible too, depending on what the vineyard and the site and the grapes need on that vintage.
Is that the Santa Lucia Highlands in the back, the mountain range in the background there?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we're right at the base there. And yeah, you can see it's super tight spacing. Everything has to be hand done in this vineyard, which is really cool. We go out every year and do the first harvest for the Isabelle Sparkling here. It's really fun. We have to have specialized kind of ATVs and stuff to make its way through the vines. So it's just a lot of handwork, a lot of manual labor that goes into making these grapes and growing these vines and making it really special.
Yeah, when we come out with the 2020 Isabelle Sparkling, you guys will know that my hands touched those grapes because that was the first vintage I actually got to be a part of. So I'm excited for that one. I think I just didn't get out of bed early enough because we do that at like 6 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
for the 2019 because I was there, but I did not quite make it. So question we've got, I believe, yes, that's on this one that we're talking about. How long do you let this one open up after you pour it?
Yeah, this one, I mean, Pinots for me, I don't feel like it needs a ton of time. It doesn't have a whole lot of tannin. There's nothing aroma-wise that needs to totally blow off. So this one, again, 20, 30 minutes for me is probably good. It's going to continue to develop to Dennis's strategy of, the 3 days. I think it probably will continue to taste better over that time. But I think you're still going to get a great experience after just letting it open up just for a little bit, giving it a good swirl. And yeah, I'm the drink the first glass and let the second and third speak for themselves. But
You might
yeah,
actually hear the third glass start talking back to you if
exactly.
glasses are big enough. I want to read a quote from when I looked at the tasting notes from Heidi Scheid, because like I said, these wines, before we decide to put them out to the club members, especially, we make sure that they're on point. And we were just talking about, which is not even, we didn't even have that planned, but we were talking about what makes a reserve wine. And Heidi said, when we all gathered around to taste through the Pinot Noirs pre-bottling, this one had us applauding for its depth, concentration, and irresistible purity. So I just thought that was a really nice way to put it. I remember tasting this one before it was in the bottle, and I think it's even better now. But again, to me, this really is the testament to Isabelle's vineyard. Isabelle was Al Scheid's mother. So I know this vineyard in itself, it's really small. It has a special place in the Scheid's heart, but it's producing something so quality, and you're doing very little to it, right? Do you want to just touch on the production for this?
Sure, yeah. So we bring these grapes into the winery. We'll just stem them to whole berry, sort of our traditional, real gentle handling with Pinot Noir, those kind of thinner skins. You don't want to totally mash them up. Just kept it just a really delicate process. Added some yeasts that we traditionally use, that kind of some Burgundian isolated yeast to this fermentation that we know gives kind of that real pure flavor, and just let the grapes aromas come out itself. Light punch downs, again, keeping gentle with this one. Pressed it at about 2.5 weeks, and then we aged it in French oak barrels. And we go 100% French oak for this. Not a whole lot of new French oak. French oak is really respectful of Pinot in general. We have some coopers that are specifically make wood for Pinot Noir grapes from Burgundy. They add that backdrop of nutmeg and spice, but they're not trying to overwhelm you with that big vanilla any of that stuff to overpower, and really just French oak's a real nice support system for Pinot Noir. So we wanted to keep it as pure as possible to the vineyard and just let that oak be a supporting character.
What are you getting on this one?
I mean, I love the evolution. I remember it started out super spicy and super strawberry, and I'm still getting those notes, but then there's also those really nice kind of cedar, leather, kind of forest, earthy, kind of mushroomy notes that are coming through now. It's
And that
really,
would be a little bit because of the aging.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so 2021, we're getting to 2024 now, almost to 2025. You know, as a wine ages, those bright aromas kind of start to fall off, and then there's these other underlying aromas that start to be revealed. And we're at a really cool place of this wine right now, where it's got, you know, some of that fresh from the new, some of the older aromas kind of coming in and developing. It's at a really cool spot right now.
That's another part about our reserve program actually that we didn't mention is a lot of these bottles get more rest time before we release them than our state wines. They typically go out a little bit younger, and our reserve program, after we've bottled the wines, we tend to lay them down for quite a bit. So we just released this to you guys, and it's a 2021. So we've let this sit, and I think this is like drink now. I think you could age it a little bit more and get more of those tertiary aromas, a little bit more development, but it has that really pretty bright fruit with some of those other characteristics. I think it's, again, porch pounder, but I would have to sip this a little slower, I think.
Yeah, this is, I mean, and to your point on ageability, this wine has legs to age, and really it's to your preference, you know, in terms of wine style. It's got so much going on right now. I think it's going to be excellent later on. It'll be a different wine, but it's going to age wonderfully. I'm just going to get myself a case and just kind of drink it now, and maybe I'll hide one in the cabinet for later.
You
We'll
must
see.
have more storage than me, because that's what everyone says. They say buy a few and then drink it every so often so you can see the evolution of it. But I
I'll
had
just
to get
drink.
rid of my
I'll drink
wine
11
rack.
now. Yeah.
So, what food pairings are we gonna say? Same, pretty similar to Pinot Meunier on this?
Similar to Pinot Meunier, and I mean, also if you don't want to get too bougie, I mean, this would be a great pizza wine in itself too. Yeah, again with the holidays, those bright red fruits and the, you know, those earthy aromas too. I could see this with being, you know, some sort of stir fry would be really great. You know, anything with a steak with a, you know, a mushroom sauce on top could go really nicely with this. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think maybe
it's
the Pinot Meunier for me would be like the Thanksgiving share that. This one, it's gonna cost me a little bit more. I think I might just be drinking this one by myself. Maybe let my husband have a glass or two, but
yeah, this will be like Christmas afternoon.
might have to hog this one. Yeah, I think
There
so.
you go.
Yeah. Any questions, comments on this last one? I want Casey to quickly, before we hop off, I know we've already been on here over an hour, tell us just kind of where we're at with the vineyards right now, since we kind of have somebody who can take us there to the vineyards. I know the colors are changing on the grapes, and harvest is going to be coming up sooner than later. So I'll keep my eye on the chat for the next few minutes. Casey, if you just want to let us know where we are right now with the 2024 vintage.
Sure, 24 vintage. So it started off similar to last year in terms of season. We had that wet winter again, cool winter. But what's different is now you know, last year we never really had that big warm event in the summer, or never really got that hot. But it's been hot. I mean, it's been hot. And so it's really moved things along. It's a really cool balance this year. I think we're kind of back to normal in terms of when we're going to be harvest. Harvest last year was 2-3 weeks kind of late. Made it really interesting. It's going to be a really cool vintage, cool and cool. Where this one, we're kind of back to normal timelines. But what's nice about this vintage is rather than having, you know, that occasional like crazy heat spike to, you know, 115 degrees, we've just been consistently at that kind of 90, 100. So things are developing nicely. We got some colors out there now, and probably going to start harvesting, you know, Labor Day, maybe a little bit before.
Awesome. We're excited for this next vintage. I don't see any other questions, and I know I've kept you guys for pretty long. So if that is it, I think we could probably wrap it up. Dave and Brenda, thank you for joining us. Leanne, you guys have a nice setup with a lot of wines I saw there, so they were doing it right. I would like to be at their house right now. But I thank you guys all for joining. Thank you to Casey. I know you are super busy. Thank you
You too.
to our both of our coworkers whose houses we are in right now, because we aren't even in our own homes. So I'm glad we have a community where we can do this, and hopefully we can do it again soon. So thank you guys so much, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Chelsea. Great job.
Cheers. Take care, guys. Thank you. All right.